So this is a little bit of an extra video that I'm doing to give you guys some extra information about what goes on here, but also around the subject of MS and HSCT. So I've got two guests with me. One,
hey guys,
that's Chris and Frank. Frank will introduce himself, as will Chris. They're at different stages along this process. In fact, Chris isn't even on this process. He's a carer out here for his wife. But we'll talk about where they're at the moment and what we think about the clinic and the care provision in Russia before talking more generally about MS, HSCT research that they found, because these two guys have done a load of research. It puts me into complete shame, the amount of research these guys have done. So they've got some knowledge, but the caveat is we are not professionals. So whatever advice we may give, we aren't doctors. This is just the things that we found out along the way. So treat everything we say with a pinch of salt and a lot of care, and do your own research and ask your own professionals the questions. But anyway, first of all, over to Frank.
hello guys. My name is Frank. I'm 31 years old and I'm an MS patient here. I came here on the 12th of March and I got my first diagnosis in like mid-January this year. So I'm fairly, what can I say, jumped straight into HSCT and haven't tried any medications yet. So what more can I say?
So first of all, I'd say that's a really quick jump into doing this. Can you tell us why you were only diagnosed in January and here we are in March, you've ended up being here so quickly?
Yeah, it's basically because I did the research from when I got the first symptoms in November, and the evidence is overwhelming for HSCT compared to the drugs they offer you. I think the statistics from Richard Burks, the doctor from the US, last research is like, for me that has RRMS, relapse remitting, the stats are like, or success rate is 85 to 95%. Like success rate measured 4 years after the procedure has been done. And the same number for medication is 18%, if I remember correctly. So you need to do your own research, but
so like, after 4 years, you're saying that the success of HSCT for relapsing remitting is 85%, and that compares to 18% on disease-modifying drugs, which is a massive difference.
Yeah, and that only slows it down anyway, the medication. So you're never going to get rid of it with the medications. So that's why it's an easy choice. You should do it.
So Frank is at the same stage as myself here. So we are kind of HSCT buddies. We were up last night talking late and, just passing the time. So it's really nice to find people that you get on with here, because after all, you're going to be here for a month. So that's really good. So thanks, Frank, for being a normal human being. I'm going to pass you over to Chris now, who will introduce himself.
Hey guys, my name's Chris. So as what they were saying earlier, I don't have MS. I'm actually here supporting my wife, Sarah, who has RRMS. She's currently getting HSCT, obviously, at the moment. And we've been here for about 3-ish weeks now, and my wife has literally just moved into isolation, which we can no longer see each other. So I thought I'd literally come on and share my information with being a carer as well. Yeah.
Essentially, we just felt really sorry for him. I think he must just be sitting in the corner every day, just twiddling his thumbs. So we thought we could put in some good use. But what are your experiences of being a carer?
Well, initially when my wife got first diagnosed, which was about 1.5 years ago, literally me as a carer, I was like, well, what can I do to fix this situation, knowing not really anything about MS in general. And the first thing I literally typed into my phone was, can this be cured? And it came back with no.
Yeah.
So, and then I freaked out. So from that, it literally led me on to researching tons and tons and tons of information, through nutrition, through training, through information, through different forms of treatments and things like that, which then that led me into doing further research with HSCT.
Yeah.
So before you got onto HSCT as a viable option, what would be your highlights of things to take away, things that you found that work? And bear in mind that some things work for some people and don't work for other people.
Exactly.
But say diet, what have you found that worked best for Sarah?
Well, to give you guys a little bit of a rundown with myself, I'm a personal trainer, which I do full time as my job. So she always used to eat healthy in general because that's just what we do. As soon as we found out she got diagnosed with MS, the first thing that needed to be changed that I think is very, very, or one of the most important things, obviously, is changing everything that can be inflammatory to reduce inflammation and further damage. So that's going to be obviously processed foods, sugars, gluten, dairy to an extent, depending on the person, and things like that. That's going to be probably your first step when you first get diagnosed, or even through the whole time, to try and reduce inflammation the best you can. Going from there. Other things that we did look into, which I think is going to be very important as well, is maybe looking into environmental factors like heavy metal toxicity and things like that to, again, cause or improve deficiencies and also improve inflammation and causing, or which can cause further damage.
So what does that look like on a practical basis? So what adaptations to your house or life would that be?
So literally what we did, obviously, when we did our heavy metals test, which was through a hair analysis, we obviously first removed everything that we were sensitive to. For example, making our own deodorants, toothpastes, leaving on the diffusers a lot more to remove all the negative or positive ions in the air from technology as well. And from that, trying to reduce things that we can control, for example, like alcohol and stuff like that.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Like, for me, I have a feeling of what could have triggered the disease. Do you have like a theory on what might have caused it?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. What?
Yeah, I could answer myself first.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's a constant lack of sleep and no sunshine, basically, because like 2 months before I got my first attack or relapse, I had blood work done, tested vitamin D and testosterone, among other things. And the vitamin D was seriously low, like far below the normal range. And also my testosterone levels had dropped in half since the past year.
Because vitamin D is going to be a precursor to hormone levels.
So I have been keeping track of the testosterone for like 10 years at least. So it was like a big drop for me. And I tried to reverse that, obviously, with the diet and exercise and stuff, but it didn't budge. It didn't increase after I got the MS. So lack of sleep, poor diet, and basically no exercise in the last couple of years.
And interestingly, if Chris's point about heavy metals and technology uses to go by, you spend an awful lot of time, as do I, on technology. So surrounded by, you say you've got 4 screens around you.
Yeah, but I'm not into like the electrical magnet stuff, if that's what you're...
Yeah, well, but this is interesting how people take on different... I mean, it's the nature of people in general. And when we come to health, it's like some people say, I think that's important, and they change that, and someone else say, no, I don't think that's important. And it might be that you don't think it's important because actually it's really important to your life.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, like in Norway we don't smoke a lot, but we use snus in our lip, tobacco, and I've been abusing that for a long time as well. It's like
bad man.
Low vitamin D and tobacco is known, I think, causes of MS disease.
And it's worth pointing out here that it's quite a good selection of people because, I mean, I don't know the official data, but we asked Alexei, the guy that drove us around the other day, and he knows how many people come in here because he gives them all lists and stuff.
Yeah.
So what are the two most common countries that he comes across? And he said Australia and Norway. And here we have Norway and Australia, and it's, you know, that's there must be, obviously with Norway you can see maybe the sunlight and the diet, possibly the exercise. I don't know.
Well, you get enough vitamin D if you're in the sun out in the summer, because it stores in the fat and everything.
Yeah.
But when you're an IT consultant with 3 jobs, you know,
It's going to be difficult.
Yeah, you don't get out a lot. So.
And then how does that fit in with you, Chris?
I think that is close. What I come to the conclusion with my research is I think it's a combination of everything. So you've got environmental factors through what you eat, what's in the food, for example, pesticides, herbicides, things like that, that could be a factor. You've got stress from increased cortisol.
Yeah.
You've got things like smoking, drinking, tobacco, which then can extend more inflammation as well. Obviously, sunlight and vitamin D is going to be very, very important as well. Like my wife, for example, spends a lot of time inside as a nanny and doesn't really get a chance to really get out a huge amount. And then when we go home, we're inside as well. So I think for me, it's a combination of everything because I think they all synergistically increase your chance of getting MS. Obviously, other factors which we didn't really discuss just then, if you have a gene defect and things like that as well. I didn't worry about looking into the defective genes. I can't remember what they're called, like MHR or MHRG or whatever type of genes they
Essentially,
are.
you're not going to get MS unless you have the gene defect. So the gene defect is your basic issue, and then the environmental factors can trigger it. And if you don't have those environmental triggers, that can lay dormant, and you might never get MS.
Yeah. So the reason why I didn't really look into that is I don't think I could have changed the situation if there was a faulty gene. So things that I looked into were stuff that we could control from our lifestyle, which is why I looked into those particular things at the start.
So the next question then would be, having got the diagnosis and changing those things for both of you, what do you think had the most effect?
Fatigue.
So sorry, what changes had the most effect? So on fatigue, for example, what had the most positive effect?
Not pushing yourself too much. Like I think the food was a massive factor, but I think regardless of that, making sure that she's not pushing her body all day, every day, and living a life that is hectic and busy with stress.
Yeah.
Because as soon as her stress levels went up, if she was like, for example, having an argument with her family, her head would just start instantly pounding.
Right.
So I think stress for my wife, Sarah, was the most important thing that we needed to manage.
Interesting, really interesting. How about you, Frank?
For me, the first thing I did was like obviously Google. What the fuck should I do now?
Google.
Sorry. And
that word. That's a Norwegian word. They wouldn't understand.
Okay, that's great. Well, the first thing I did was change the diet, and I feel like cutting gluten was a big thing, actually, and processed food in general. Started eating most of my carbs from vegetables and fruit, protein from lean meat and fish, and salmon, fat fish, and fats from nuts and avocado. And that I can feel it like instantly if I start eating like a takeaway pizza or something like that. I get the tingling back in my hands.
It's interesting. It's so instant.
Yeah, like a couple of hours later, I will feel the symptoms again. And I also started taking high-dose vitamin B1 and B3 because I found some research about that being a precursor for remyelination, and I feel that has helped me. And the niacin, I think that's the B3 one, that relieves my numbness in my hands like instantly. And I had huge issues with feeling like my hands were frozen all the time, like in a bucket with ice water. So I was looking for something to relieve that, and that worked for me.
Which is odd because we were talking about this earlier yesterday, and where Frank has really cold hands,
good.
and putting hot water on it doesn't affect it at all. I have warm hands, normal hands, and when I touch a hot cup of tea, my heat intolerance is really bad and it burns me really badly. And this is part of the problem, I think, with MS, is the range of symptoms that you have
it's so
are
different.
so different that actually you're trying to treat one patient the same as another patient. It just
It's
doesn't.
impossible.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so something might work for Frank that might not work for me and might not work for Sarah.
Well,
and then to add to that, I mean, Sarah, I presume, and Frank are relapsing remitting patients, whereas I'm a primary progressive patient. So my whole condition is quite different. It's not so much about the inflammation as it is with relapsing remitting, and so therefore treating it is very different. Hence, actually, they generally don't treat it because the drug, in the words of the verb, the drugs don't work. So that's why for relapsing remitting patients, they generally don't accept them on these courses unless they've had several failed attempts at disease-modifying drugs. But I don't even get offered disease-modifying drugs, so for me, this is basically the only roll of the dice.
option you have,
So that's talked a little bit about supplements. There are a few other supplements I think that you thought, Frank, that you found useful. Some antihistamines for dogs.
Yeah, you're talking about the clemastine.
Yeah.
I've read the study on it. I'm not sure how to interpret
I looked into it as well.
Like it could be positive, but it's not really conclusive. I did ask Fedorenko about it, and he was like, "It's a good idea, but the evidence is not really there
to support
It's
it.
a bit early,
it's a bit early, but it doesn't hurt to try, man.
Of course. Well,
It's
what are you going to try? You're going to try drugs that don't work, or try supplements that are going to help you?
So the idea is this is an antihistamine that you can normally readily get it for dogs, but to take it in high dosage for humans gives you what helps with.
You can use it for humans too.
Yeah.
Obviously, but it makes you more fatigued.
That's the one conclusion that I came to, that it's effective.
Effective at what?
Well, looking at the studies as what they were just discussing, it could be effective, but reading in the forums and things like that patients that had taken it, the main side effect they all said was that they were extremely exhausted and fatigued, which is the only reason why I didn't try it or recommend it to my wife, because we're already doing so many different things and she was already so fatigued that at the time she was still working and we couldn't afford her to be tired and groggy throughout the day trying the antihistamine.
So someone told me who had done HSCT before, he put me onto a drug called inosine, which you can take plenty of. There's no danger in taking too much of it, for example. And there's research to suggest it's good for remyelination, I think, and for slowing down progression. And so that's one that I'm taking as a kind of like insurance policy. It's cheap as chips, and I bang a pill a day.
Is it like an over-the-counter drug?
Yeah, well, actually, I get it off eBay. I think in Britain you can get it, but it's cheaper for me to get it. In Britain, eBay is just the cheapest source of getting any kind of supplements. So I get that, and oddly enough, they're Russian packets, so they've been sent over from Russia. All bona fide, it's all fine. But they obviously give it much more easily in Russia rather than in Britain, where you can get them in health supplement packs, but they cost like £10
very expensive.
So inosine is probably the only odd one. I mean, I think we probably all do omega-3 supplements and vitamin Bs and Ds and Zs and all these kind of the normal ones, but it's just those extra ones that we found useful or could be useful.
So talking about supplements as well, there was a few that I looked into with the research, because there's so much research and the research can get very technical with how things work. Like you would think, like for example, one thing which a lot of people can look into with MS is obviously improving the gut and things like that through the gut bacteria and supplementing, for example, like glutamine. But then if you look into it further, there's a downside with taking glutamine. It can increase your ammonia in your body, which then can cause or could cause other complications and inflammation in the brain.
Now you tell me, because I've been banging myself full of L-glutamine before I came out there, and probiotics.
So there's two conflicting sides to everything. Like everything I think is going to be beneficial. And I think the easiest way to look into things is not trying to worry about little things like that. I think the main issue that a lot of people should look into is stopping as many deficiencies as possible to make your cells work better, to improve the function with everything, which everything synergistically will work together.
Yeah.
So obviously, as what they spoke about earlier, obviously high omega-3s. I tended to recommend my wife flaxseed oil over fish oil, as omega-6 is going to be slightly more inflammatory than omega-3, which is why I chose flaxseed oil having a higher omega-3 ratio to 6.
I do both.
Yeah. They do different things. Exactly. So my wife did do both, but then eventually towards the end, when she stopped going off the drugs, that's when I implemented a higher omega-3 to help with her cells. There was creatine that I looked into to help her cells produce energy, because the main side effect that my wife noticed was fatigue. And also a few other antioxidants like alpha lipoic acid and things like that that can actually help protect cell damage and stuff like that as well from further inflammation.
I mean, the real problem, I think, to jamming yourself full of supplements and doing exercise and doing changing your stress levels and taking this medicine and doing that is in science we call it fair testing or controlled experimentation, is that you can't tell. So you might end up feeling better or maybe a little bit worse in this respect or whatever, and you can't tell which one is doing the work because you've changed so many different variables, and this is always going to be a struggle. And so it can be a bit hit and miss, and you might want to take that off and see if it changes or add that on. But you have to, generally you just want to do everything, and so you take on everything and you're not quite sure what works.
So one thing that my wife was taking was initially B12, which again B12 is going to be very, very important, but it started making her feel funny. I don't know what she meant by funny, but she's like, my body feels like it doesn't want it anymore. Where you look up supplementation and MS, and one of the first things that comes up is vitamin B12. So like what you were just saying then is that I think it's a consistent changing of everything, even on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis, which is very, very important.
Yeah. Have you got anything to add to that, Frank?
Oh, I actually never tried B12, so that's I might need to check that out. But I take everything in moderation, and the only thing I want to recommend is the high dose B3. If you have like problem with the numbness in your hands.
My wife took that and she noticed it straight away.
Yeah,
Really?
And I take the one that gives you the skin flush.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, opens the capillaries or what it's called.
Because I think I've got B3, and there's a famous drugs company in Britain called Vitabiotics, and they offer like Well Man and Well Woman, and one of the ones they offer is usually for sort of more elderly people. It's called Neurazan, right? So it's for cognitive function, and it's got all the B's and zincs and whatever.
Yeah, but the modern B doesn't give you the flush.
Yeah, but I'm wondering whether I need to do a separate B3, because actually for 3 years I've not been able to feel the feelings in my hands. So I'm wondering whether that would be a good call. This could be a useful conversation. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, but you should try, like, they have developed it because people don't like the flush.
Yeah, exactly.
But you want the flush.
Right.
So it's the flush that you need, which then opens the capillaries to improve the blood flow. So the flushing with the niacin, they reckon it could be another issue with MS is the lack of blood flow to the brain, which is why they recommended the
So,
flushing.
have you heard about this CCSVI? So,
No.
Like
so
a stent.
yes. So
Yes, I read
Yeah,
the
so
study with the Japanese guy, I think it was.
there's on Amazon Prime. There's a really interesting documentary called Living Proof, which is about a guy who's had MS since he was 19. He's a documentary filmmaker, and he thought finally he'd make a film about his MS. And his family have been railing against the MS Society in Canada, who are funded by the drugs companies, and all the healthcare provision for people with MS are dictated by the drugs companies. So he's looking at alternative things like HSCT. And one of the things he went and looked into was CCSVI, which is a really simple, very cheap process of putting a stent in your neck veins so that it opens up. So for some people, they have very thin veins in their neck. I think I might, because I'm spending all the time looking down at my laptop on my mobile phone, and maybe
Which everyone
that's
does these days anyway.
impinged on the blood flow. And by opening that up, that blood flow is then much more adequate to the brain. And he had, in his small sort of, I don't know, 69 odd cases that he looked at, and most of them had huge recoveries. But I don't know that it's been replicated, and there's been some sort of controversy with it. But I mean, for something that's so cheap, I would be wondering whether I would even do that privately, just for the hell of it. Like it can't. But it's interesting you mentioned blood flow there as being.
Because I can't remember exactly, but there was the study with the doctor that actually did it for his wife. I think it was in Japan, and that's one of the articles that I read with the blood flow, and it worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many other, like, if you read all those different things, I think they can all be beneficial. It's just depending on what one you think is going to be the most important at that particular time for that particular person.
And I think what's interesting, and Frank was saying this last night, is that these things on their own, they're not going to stop your MS or cure your MS. This is all about dealing with certain symptoms, possibly. And it's only HSCT that really kind of goes to the heart of the matter, at least more so. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to, unless you have gene therapy to change your genetic instructions, you need to go to the next level on from there, which is going to be your immune system, and really deal with that. And HSCT is the only kind of game of that.
You have a chance at stopping MS. You need to wipe out all the immune cells that has the bad antibody that makes it attack your own body. So basically, chemo is the only cure. You could do there is a research being done in stem cell treatment to repair damage that has been done, and that probably will be a good alternative to regain function.
So stem cell without the chemo.
But it won't stop the disease.
Because from memory, they use the different stem cells. They use the ones in your fat. Is that right?
I think a popular one is they take the umbilical cord from newborn babies and extract the stem cells and inject it into.
Rather than using the ones in your bone marrow.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm not sure about that stuff.
So, other than that, is there anything else you think, any really useful advice for people coming here for this HSCT that you think that you would like to share with them, or any particular nuggets of advice and information for lifestyle and food and diet, or anything? Is there anything you'd like to add that you think is super important?
I just want to say that do your own research, and HSCT is actually the only thing that works, and you should do it if you have the opportunity to do it. That's what I want to say.
You were talking. You had met with the most sort of famous neurologist in
my
Norway.
town.
And Norway has a lot of MS
talented
sufferers.
people.
And yet, talk to us about your MRI first.
Well, I went to a private clinic in Norway to get my MRI done to avoid waiting in the public health queue, because it's going to take months. And that's why I'm here so quick. But the results from the MRI in the private sector in Norway was they didn't find as many lesions as they did here. And that was expected, because they used double strength on the MRI machines here. And they found, in Norway, they found 3 lesions in my head, and here they found 17. and they also found lesions in my spinal cord, and they didn't find any of that in Norway. So that was new for me. Yeah.
And that was sort of expected because
Yeah.
I'd had my results just before Frank, and I said the same thing. They'd found 3 at home. First of all, on a private one at home, which was a bit blurrier than the NHS one I had, which is a bit better, but still only sort of 3. And then came here and had the MRI, and they'd found 11, and one's 2.7 centimeters in my spinal cord, which is what's causing blockages to my limbs, which is why my deterioration of my limbs is more significant, and it fits in with my PPMS diagnosis as well. So yeah, MRIs are seem to be better here than we've had before. Is that the same?
Exactly right. Like that's the same thing as what we already knew that anyway. We've all the people on all the Facebook forums and things like that. They've already said the same thing, that every time they come here, the neurologists and that say, oh, you know, look, our machines that we use are just as good as the ones over in Russia. But then when we had our MRI done here in Russia, there was like 20 odd lesions that we found, and 60% of her spinal cord was blocked from a lesion on her spine. And Dr. Fedorenko said within 5 years that she'll be in a wheelchair, which is what the neurologist had never discussed with us back in Australia.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. So you know, that alone I think is phenomenally important, because it's almost like it's a whole different level of disease that we're finding that we're having, or our partners are having, and I think and the pushback you get, I've had less pushback in Britain actually. My neurologist has been fairly supportive, and my MS nurse. So in Britain, you get your treatment is coordinated by an MS nurse, who's your go-between between neurologist and GP and whatnot. And she's been broadly supportive. They're just worried about my aftercare coming back. But a lot of countries are like, no, you can't go and see can't go and do HSCT.
I just want to add that my neurologist in Norway, he wasn't really negative to HSCT, but I got the feeling, I'm not going to name drop everybody, but I got the feeling that he couldn't officially recommend it because of guidelines in Norway, and that it isn't an approved treatment yet. They are doing studies on it, but they don't get funding to finish the study. So
I wonder why they don't get funding. The drugs companies.
It's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
And how were your experiences in Australia then?
Yeah, so pretty much exactly the same thing. Like when my wife got diagnosed, I looked into HSCT basically straight away due to the story covered on 60 Minutes a long time ago. I think the lady's name was Kirsty or something like that. Which then Sarah's like, oh, hey, look at this. I want to launch you. Look into it for me. And I did. And then within the first month, I think, or so, I can't remember now, when Sarah and myself were having a meeting with the MS nurse, I asked the MS nurse, you know, what do you think about HSCT? And then she was like, look, there's no research on it. You know, da-da-da-da-da. And I was doing like 3 hours of research every single night on virtually every single topic you can think of. And I was like, are you kidding me? There was so much research on it, but I was polite. I was going, okay, cool, that's fine. And I'm like, well, how can they say that when there's so much research to support HSCT, not just for MS, but all other autoimmune conditions as well? And then literally a year and a bit later, when we told them that we were booked in for HSCT, they were like, look, we don't want to be for it. We're not against it. We just want to help you and give you the right information. We are worried about their aftercare and things like that as well. And that was just in a year and a half later on down the track. Like imagine if we waited an extra couple of years or even 10 years or however long it takes for the trials to be over.
Time is brain.
It's a no-brainer to get this done. Why wait for something that may eventually happen?
And I think both of you went to your sort of neurologists or consultants with like research papers in mind, if not physically, to tell them about. You both mentioned how, you know, and we were talking, I think it was you and I, Chris, the other night, about how, you know, neurologists you expect to be at the top of their game, knowing the latest stuff to come out. But actually, if you think in reality, the reality of life, and I know this as a teacher, is you do your work, you go home, you're exhausted, right? Actually, I do shed loads of work at home, but a neurologist might get home exhausted and just go, right, I'm going to eat, see my wife, do this, do that, and
Yeah.
then get up again next morning, go and do their neurology all day, no break. And where's the chance for them to read the latest journals? Where's the chance for them? Do they get to enough conferences to find out about the?
And it's a
these
different
treatments?
field as well.
Yeah,
And
you
And
would-
yeah, 'cause
that's
not-
that's what I think that one of the major issues is as what you were just saying. Then it is a different field, which I think the MS nurse maybe has more responsibility to.
Can you explain what it means to be a different field?
So the neurology will just work on obviously the brain, whereas the MS nurse should educate or would educate the patient in regards to everything MS related.
So why is HSCT not the brain then?
I think it's a different treatment.
So just to explain how is so it falls under hematology. So
Yes, correct.
hematology is the kind of discipline dealing with bloods.
Yes, correct.
So the fact that stem cell treatment is to do with stimulating your bones and
Yeah.
your bone marrow to produce
Your stem cells.
your stem cells, which is ostensibly to do with your blood system.
Yeah, look, I could be wrong, but that's the feeling that I got. Like
Yeah, the same.
when we went and seen the hematologist, we got recommended through the HSCT forums through that guy. We went, or not me, because I was working at the time, but my wife went there and had a meeting with him, and he said, look, HSCT, it works, it's effective. Don't listen to what everyone's saying. It's not as dangerous as what everyone thinks. Your neurologist will just try and tell you not to do it. He'll tell you that it's dangerous, it will kill you, and he'll try and get you on a different drug. So when my wife told him that we were going to get HSCT, he literally did exactly that. He said, look, it doesn't work, it will kill you, you've got to stay on disease-modifying drugs the rest of your life. Why don't you try this drug instead? So it was literally exactly what the hematologist said, which that is insane. I just can't
So
believe
there doesn't seem to be enough integration between hematology and neurology within the hospital or the healthcare networks in our countries, because actually this is a combined effort of neurology and hematology,
Yeah.
HSCT, and then you have the compromise of healthcare professionals being given kickbacks by drug companies for giving the drugs that they do. I mean, you were talking about Lemtrada last night, which is the #1 drug for many patients with MS, and you were calculating the cost of it, and it's absolutely staggering.
Yeah, it's the same yearly for medication as it is for one-time treatment with HSCT. On top of that, you're going to get other like side effects from the medication. It's like a 30% chance to develop other autoimmune diseases on Lemtrada, and you're going to what's the word? Not work anymore.
Yeah.
So you're
It's
going
not
to cost the society there as well. So it's really hard to understand the logic behind.
Well, it's not, because the logic is that the physicians or the
I don't want to say
neurologists,
it, you know.
they generally will get money from the drugs companies or pressure from the charities who get funded by the drugs companies in order to provide.
At least it feels that way.
Yeah.
Like it's certainly, but that's documentary Living Proof. It's really interesting. As a retired neurologist who basically says, yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And he's really open about it.
Look, it makes sense. Like, I used to work in retail in the supplement industry as well, and it's sales. Like, you've got certain things which you have to recommend over other certain things, and without saying, look, that doesn't work, it's crap, you go, well, actually, why don't you try this instead?
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So it's so frustrating. Like, myself as a health professional, being a personal trainer, I try and if my client comes to me and goes, all right, well, I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian, or I'm I want to count macros or whatever, I won't go, no, that doesn't work. I'll go, all right, well, this is what I would recommend, this is all the research I've got to prove that this is going to be maybe a better option, but we'll do your way first, and then when we need to change something to make it more optimal, then we'll do that. And that's the sort of level of care that I expected from the other health professionals that we would go to see, and we just did not get that, which then that leads to patients that have MS or supporting family and friends to do their own research and make up their own mind, which I think it's not great.
I have no doubt that in 10 years' time, 15 years' time,
Yeah.
HSCT will be a major area of healthcare provision for people with MS. I've no doubt,
totally
because
agree.
even in Britain at the moment, I think you've got London and Sheffield do it, but you've got Southampton coming online this year for relapsing remitting only. But that's a step forward, and you think, you know, as the research comes in, and I know Dr. Fedorenko is doing a seminar in November, which actually Frank's going to try and come out to go to.
Yeah.
So he's presenting lots of data over to you.
Yeah, I think he's gonna present like more long-term data, and I actually found one of his studies that was published in 2015 yesterday on Google Scholar.
Yeah.
And I think the number was over 8 years on average. It's like 85% success rate after 8 years.
So that's just giving me a shiver down my spine. That is fabulous, right? Because when you were explaining to me yesterday that drugs, after 1 year, like the best drugs give you 100% success rate, but then the drop off from 1 year to 4 years goes down to 18%.
Yeah.
So drugs look really good early doors, and then whoom.
Yeah, because the numbers the neurologist will give you is like the 1 year.
Yeah.
It's like a 70% chance to stay relapse free, and that's bullshit. Basically.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Yeah. So the long-term prognosis for stem cell treatment, HSCT, looks to be exceptionally good. And because the data is relatively new, what we all really want to know is, we've got the 4-year data, and the 4-year data looks really good, and it's stabilized at sort of what you reckon, 85%, which is fantastic for the cost, because actually it's relatively low, well, very low cost. But then it's like the next 4 years and the next 4 years, you know, what does a prognosis look for 20 years? And of course, we don't just have enough data yet. I think Dr. Fedorenko's first ever patient, you were telling
20
me,
years ago.
Yeah, you were telling me that there's the guide, the guide before Dr. Fedorenko did it on a woman who in the late 90s or something.
Yeah, I
and
think
she's
around
still
2000.
Yeah, around 2000.
And she's still EDSS1.
Yeah, I think
that's 18
she
years
started at the EDSS6, and now she's 1, and
she stabilized.
Yeah.
So, you know,
After
that's
20 years.
anecdotal, and that's just one person.
that's one person.
But that gives you a sense of what it could do and what we're all hoping for, obviously.
But there is a lot more of long-term data getting published and released now online with HSCT in general in regards to stabilization and EDDS scores, or whatever you want to call them, as well now, which is really, really great.
Yeah. So fantastic. Well, was there any kind of parting gifts you want to give anyone who might be watching it, the 3 people that might watch this?
One thing I want to say, if you are considering Russia with Dr. Fedorenko, there is a lot of research with Dr. Fedorenko himself, which I've got links to online with all his publications that he's put out. I think there might be 20 or more publications with HSCT. As well, which I've read, so that there is a lot of.
Have you got them stored in a central place?
I've got the link to it. Yes.
Yeah. Can I put that link on the bottom of the video,
sure.
So you can see it just down there.
Cool.
Thank you, Chris. By the way, any part and damn good luck to Sarah, your wife.
Yeah. Thank you.
Not good luck, good science. Any parting gifts, Frank?
I mean,
mountain of a Norwegian Viking.
You should really consider it. You know, no matter what you position it, you should at least do the research before you take a choice, and don't just listen to other people. Make up your own mind based on the facts, and that's it.
Although it is really useful to listen to other people who have done it, actually. So there are loads of really good forums, as many of you will know about.
Yeah, but
Facebook
always
forums.
double check, know, what they're saying.
Yeah, because a lot of people, there are lots of biases kicking around. You just got to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But although he said you should try it, if you're a carer watching this, probably don't try it. You won't need it. It's a lot to go through, and it's a lot of money just for the new stem cells.
Yeah.
But what's quite good, actually, what I found is they give you this whole body ultrasound, and they give you basically a whole body health check. And the meeting with Dr. Fedorenko, which I told you on a previous video, was like, oh yeah, you've got a 2-centimeter cyst on your kidney. You might want to look at that, but it's all right. So it's like, oh, this is great. I'm getting a full on.
Yeah, I think just doing that, like I said to my wife, like even coming here and just getting a general checkup,
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah.
Even just doing the checkup would be awesome.
Yeah, and Frank was really pleased to find out.
Yeah, they found a polyp on my gallbladder actually, so that's interesting. And
Yeah.
I was pleased to know that my heart is okay because I have some heart issues in the family. So I'm very pleased so far.
Yeah, good stuff. So it's slightly expensive way to get a full health check, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So I hope this was in some way useful. Look, if there are any questions you've got, please put them on below on the Facebook comments, on the YouTube comments. But I will be posting this to various Facebook groups, so also put any comments below. And if you want any videos done of any other aspects of the treatment, or any more from these guys while they're still around. Chris is not around for too much longer, but Frank will be with me.
Yeah.
Sadly enough for him, for the rest of the time. Let us know, and we'll be happy to do this. Hope it's been useful. Take it easy.